Why is it that everything that we get from you is yes, no, or I don't know?
I don't know.
What are you gonna say tomorrow when I say we got your hair with the body? Look at all that on your head. You don't think nothing fell out? It did. Your hair is there. Your hair's there, man.
When Lauren Giddings, a recent graduate from law school, goes missing, the town of Macon, Georgia halts to a stop as her friends and family try desperately to find her. But within hours, an unlikely suspect emerges, not because of a plethora of evidence, but because of his own freak out on air while cameras are rolling. The majority of the following photos, videos, and more have never been seen before. 27-year-old Lauren Giddings was reported missing on June 30th, 2011, but by then she had already been gone for 4 days. She was a student in Mercer Law who just graduated the month prior. At the time of her disappearance, she was preparing to take the bar exam, and then she would have become a defense attorney. But tragically, she never got the chance. Little did she know, a killer had been watching her every move. The only hint that something had been wrong was one incident, but one that she had easily dismissed. Lauren told her sister, Caitlin Wheeler, that after returning to her apartment following a trip, she thought that some of her things had been moved around, as though someone had been in there while she was gone. But she had no proof, just a feeling, and she eventually dismissed it. But that would prove to be a grave mistake. The summer of her graduation, Lauren's sister got married, and she took a few weeks off to spend time with her loved ones. But following the wedding, Lauren told her family and friends that she would be studying non-stop for the bar to make up for the lost time. With this in mind, they weren't too concerned when they didn't hear from her for a few days. But the days stretched on, and still there were no calls, emails, or answered texts. Her sister was the first one to realize something was terribly wrong. On June 29th, she reached out to Lauren's friends at Mercer and began to piece together that not only had no one heard from her, but they also hadn't seen her in days. What is especially chilling is that according to her calendar, Lauren was due to move out from her apartment the next day, on June 30th. Her car was still parked in her parking space, and after Lauren's friends heard from her sister, they decided to look for her and search her apartment. Her friends got in using a key they knew she kept in a white glass vase on a table outside her door. Checking her computer, they uncovered an email she sent revealing that she thought someone had tried to break into her apartment on the Thursday night before she vanished. Eerily, her ID and keys, including the other apartment key, were all inside, as though Lauren had come home and locked the door behind her, and then vanished. Lauren's family didn't live nearby, so her father drove that night to Macon to speak to police, and a missing persons report was officially filed for Lauren 4 days after she was last heard from. There were no witnesses. It was just a matter of interviewing anybody who lived at that apartment complex, or anyone who knew Lauren, with the hope of finding someone who knew what could have happened to her. Little did the police know, the case would have its prime suspect in only 12 hours of investigating. One of her friends, Ashley Morehouse, gave an emotional account to an officer about the last time she saw Lauren.
When was the last time you've actually physically seen Lauren?
It would be early Saturday morning at about 4 a.m. That Friday night we went out to the bar and she came back to my boyfriend's place to stay for the evening.
Did you see Lauren when you woke up that morning?
No.
You're just assuming she was there?
Yes.
Did you ever see her or talk to her again?
No.
Ashley was one of the first people who alerted the authorities to Lauren's disappearance. Lauren's next-door neighbor and law school classmate, 25-year-old Stephen McDaniel, also spoke briefly with an officer.
How long have you lived next to Lauren?
Since I started law school back in, it'd be August of '08, I think.
When was the last time you think you seen Lauren?
It was either last week or the week before that.
Okay. Is there anything that you could tell me today or add to your statement that could help me locate Lauren?
I can't think of anything.
Stephen, along with Lauren's other neighbors and friends, were then asked to go to the police station to give their statements. As the two had lived side by side for years, Stephen was the perfect person to ask if he had heard or seen anything that may be helpful to the case.
I just want to clarify some things about your statement. I asked you to come down here today because you're Lawrence's next door neighbor, right?
Yeah.
And you told me in your statement that you've been home all week, right? All weekend?
Mm-hmm.
Has anybody come stay visit you while you were at home?
No.
You didn't have no friends over?
Mm-mm.
Anybody see you this weekend that you've been home?
I don't know.
I had asked you in your statement because I've asked everyone that lives in that apartment complex if it would be all right for us to search their apartment, give me consent to search.
Yeah.
I'm asking that I would be there and that no one's going to search your apartment without you being present, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in your statement, you stated that you didn't want me to do that.
I've got several firearms that I own.
It isn't terribly surprising to hear that a law student would refuse to consent to search. However, what is unusual is that Stephen would continue to consent to police interviews without legal representation.
And I don't want other people...
Well, how many firearms do you have?
I've got a semi-automatic rifle, and then I've got 2 handguns as well.
Well, you understand that we're trying to locate Lauren. She's missing. And you stated that you're willing to do anything to help me.
If I can help, I will, but...
By helping me, I've asked everyone there, and everyone in the apartment complex has agreed, except you.
It's the lawyer in me, I suppose. What can I say? I just needed to know the reasoning behind you not doing it. You just are worried that I'm going to mess with your firearms if you're standing there? Nah, I'm always just protective of my space.
Did you hurt your nose or something?
Where?
The red mark on your nose right there. How'd you get that red mark on your nose?
I don't know. Is it a mirror?
Yeah, well, I'll show you. How'd you get this mark down here on your chin?
Place I've been picking at.
So you don't want me looking in your apartment at all?
After some convincing, the officer eventually inspected Stephen's apartment, looking for any sign of Lauren. Although they didn't find her, they began to notice Stephen's behavior was growing increasingly odd. Police reported that he was sweating profusely and rapidly drank multiple bottles of water. When someone encounters a threat and they go into fight or flight mode, they may experience a dry mouth as well as an increase in sweating. In fight or flight, the body shifts fluids from one part of the body, like the mouth, to other parts of the body, such as sweat glands. The police continued to comb through the neighboring apartments, and Stephen hung around the entire time. This was fairly unusual, as there were only a few reasons why Stephen would stay near the apartments all day. Maybe he was bored and had nothing else to do, but maybe he had another, more sinister reason to see if the police uncovered anything incriminating. In some cases, the perpetrator remains close to the investigation process due to an obsession, either with the victim or with the crime itself. They may at times enjoy the attention the case is receiving, so they stay close to observe the outcomes of their horrific actions. Observing all the attention the case is receiving also often makes the perpetrator feel important, especially if there's some sort of obsession at play. Later, Stephen would claim that he'd been told by the authorities that his apartment wasn't released yet, so he couldn't stay there, but also that he couldn't leave the area. This is just the beginning of a series of well-thought-out contradictions. Either way, it was during this time that he was approached by a reporter who asked him about Lauren. Allegedly, Stephen also commented to other reporters in the area that he wished he'd given Lauren one of his guns so that she could have potentially protected herself.
Yeah, Lauren was my neighbor. We're just trying to find out where she is at this point. I mean, no one has seen her since Saturday. I mean, the last time anyone heard from her was an email that she sent out, and no one's heard from her since.
What kind of person was she? I mean, what did you see?
I mean, she's as nice as can be. I mean, very personable, very much a people person.
Do you know anybody any enemies she might have had, somebody that might want to hurt her?
No, we don't know where she is. The only thing we can think is that maybe she went out running and someone snatched her.
It's notable that Stephen speaks mostly using we as the pronoun instead of I. This can be a red flag that the person talking doesn't want the focus to be on them. He may not want to single himself out in any way or draw attention to himself, so it feels safer to keep himself lumped in with the group.
Because we went over, one of her friends had a key, we went inside and tried to see if there was anything amiss, but she had a door jamb that was sitting right by it, so there was no sign that anyone broke in.
What about in the parking lot area? I know they've been doing a lot of, I think that's where they have recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Body?
This is the exact moment, caught on camera, that Stephen learns Lauren's body has been found, or rather, part of it. Note that Stephen repeats the word body, perhaps trying to buy himself more time to think. However, an alternative theory is that he was trying to behave how he thought someone would react when they found out their missing friend's body had been found. His reaction could potentially be seen as shock, as a friend learns that the person they've been searching for is actually dead. Or, more accurately, it's the very moment a killer finds out that the body they thought they'd cleverly disposed of is found. Far quicker than he expected, a carefully laid plan is already beginning to unravel, and he's just realized that very thing while on camera. Earlier, as police were searching for any sign of Lauren, they noticed a horrible smell coming from the garbage bins behind Barrister's Hall at Mercer University, across from the apartment complex where she lived. Around 9:40 a.m., they made the nightmarish discovery of a human torso, discarded along with the trash. In a strange twist of fate, the grim finding was a moment of pure luck. The garbage bin should have been picked up and emptied earlier that day, before investigators ever would have found the remains. However, that day, the garbage truck was running late. No matter what Stephen may have been thinking while talking to the reporter, the police had already noticed him hanging around and brought him back to the station to answer a few more questions. In this second interview, things take an interesting turn immediately, and Stephen's reaction to the detective is far less confident. Now that suspicion has fallen so thoroughly onto him, Stephen will use his knowledge as a law student to try and wiggle his way out of giving the police any more information. And the result is unsettling, to say the least.
You know Detective Patterson, right?
Yes.
Do you remember, put your hands up here, you remember us talking earlier tonight, right?
Yes.
You remember me earlier in the day?
Yes.
When we came down here and talked a little bit and then we left?
Yes.
Okay. I need to know about this girl right here. You know her?
Yes.
Who is that?
Lauren Giddings.
Does she live next door to you?
Yes.
When's the last time you seen her?
2 or 3 weeks ago.
Okay. Was you friends with Lauren?
Yes.
Look at me when you talk to me, son. Okay? Was you friends with her?
Yes.
Close friends?
We were good.
I mean, y'all were friends, right? Both of
Yes.
y'all are law students. You're studying to be an attorney, right?
Yes.
What kind of law do you want to go into? Criminal law?
Yes.
Is that what you want to do for a living?
Yes.
Okay.
You'll notice that there's been a distinct shift in Stephen's behavior. During the first interview, when he refused the search of his apartment, Stephen gave a lengthy explanation and talked openly with the detective about the types of firearms he owned. He used frequent hand gestures and appeared to believe he could just talk his way out of the search. The detectives would have noted his behavior during that first interview, when there was less pressure on him as his baseline, essentially how he acts when he is telling the truth. When someone's behavior changes significantly during an interrogation, detectives will see this as a red flag for possible deception. It doesn't always mean that the suspect is guilty of the crime, but there is a reason for this shift in behavior, and detectives will try to figure out what it is. If Stephen was consistent in only giving one-word answers and used a monotone voice across both interviews, his odd behavior could have been written off as normal for him. It could have been just part of his personality or how he speaks. However, the significant deviation from his baseline behavior is a red flag. Something, possibly fear of being caught, has triggered him to act completely differently from how he was earlier.
Are you almost finished?
Yes. Okay, so you don't have too much more to do, right? No. All right. Are you going to stay here in Macon? I don't know. Did you used to work at the district attorney's office in Macon? Yes. Was you on the prosecutor side or the defense side? Prosecutor. So you were on our side. Yes.
Stephen had worked in the DA's office before graduating from law school just 1 month earlier, at the same time as Lauren. At this point, he's not yet taken the bar exam. Stephen may be deliberately answering with one-word answers because it's safer, and he wants to avoid giving unnecessary or possibly incriminating information that could be used against him later. However, part of the reason for his short responses could be due to the type of questions he's being asked. The detective is using closed-ended questions, which often limits what the other person can say. The detective may have been able to get Stephen to talk more if he'd asked open-ended questions, such as, what was your relationship like with Lauren? What did you and Lauren like to do together? What was your last interaction with her like? With these types of questions, it's difficult for a suspect to just say yes or no. While closed-ended questions can be helpful when police are trying to find out specific facts, open-ended questions are better when trying to gather information, such as here.
And you lived next to Lauren for a long time? Yes. Okay. Do you know where she's at tonight? No. No. Have you ever seen her with that dress on? No.
What is most interesting is the question of why is he still talking with investigators at this point. Clearly, he understands how to invoke his right to remain silent, and yet he doesn't.
You have no idea where she's at? No.
The detective emphasizes these questions by invading Stephen's personal space and raising the picture of Lauren. This is an attempt to elicit empathy from Stephen, as it's hard to look into the face of someone if you've hurt them. At first, the detective may have been attempting to build rapport by sitting close and acting a bit buddy-buddy with him, such as patting Stephen on the shoulder, but this evolves into not allowing him to physically escape from his direct scrutiny. Still, Stephen doesn't shrink away. Most people would be quite uncomfortable with someone unfamiliar that close. However, it's important to remember when interpreting any of his behavior or actions that Stephen is likely familiar with typical police techniques.
What do you think happened to her?
I don't know.
Do you even care that no one can find her?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know, do you?
Yes.
He may believe that police have no real evidence tying him to Lauren's disappearance, so as long as he appears at least somewhat cooperative, he will be in the clear. However, when a suspect only provides one-word answers, detectives usually see this as the person being guarded, which is a red flag for deception. Stephen's answer here is a stark contrast to earlier in the day, only about 6 hours before, when he told the reporter that he thought Lauren could have been snatched.
The only thing we can think is that maybe she went out running and someone snatched her.
Notice that when the officer is talking to him, Stephen maintains that intense eye contact he had with the reporter, checking to see if he's being believed. Though it's clear suspicion has fallen heavily onto Stephen, he isn't the only person police interviewed. They also spoke to David Van Diver, Lauren's boyfriend.
Yes, sir.
This is your girlfriend.
I understand.
Okay. Because we can't find her. Okay?
Okay.
And we found a body. We don't know if it's her or not.
I just heard that. This
okay.
coworker told me on the way down.
All right. So I need your help.
You've got it.
Well, somebody knows something. Now I'm asking you, do you know anybody that she might been seeing besides you?
This is commonly called the wedge driving. It's similar to the prisoner's dilemma, but is used to elicit an emotional response in a suspect in relation to a victim. The couple appeared to have a long-distance relationship, one that was occasionally on and off. The detective quickly narrows in on this fact, suggesting that the two had problems in their relationship. Notice the difference in David's body language compared to Stephen's. David is leaned forward, and his body is frontally aligned with the detective, meaning his torso and legs are pointing toward the officer. He looks engaged in the conversation. Detectives trained under the Reed technique view this posture as being more in line with a truthful individual, rather than a deceptive one. Compare that to Stephen's rigid posture facing forward toward the table and away from the detective, which, according to the Reed technique, can be a red flag for deception. It's important to note that a suspect's posture alone cannot be used to make a determination about whether someone is lying or telling the truth. However, it's something detectives will take note of and may help guide them with their questioning.
So you're telling me the whole time you were going to California, you didn't call her, check in with her, nothing?
No.
Then you land in Atlanta and just go back to your apartment or house, wherever you live in Atlanta, and you didn't even call her and tell her you were home or anything?
No, if you look at the email she sent me Saturday night, and this has been, you're talking about me not being married and all this stuff, when girls start to talk about commitment stuff, the email she sent me at 10:13 Saturday night started off, I literally read it while I was in the rental car, and I saw the first line. It goes, I just had an uncomfortable or awkward conversation with Garen, and I thought it was going to lead into a whole, he wants to know when y'all are getting married, stuff like that. So I just put it down. That I'm just like, I'm not ready for that, and I put the phone down.
Do you have a key to her apartment?
No, sir. No, sir. In fact, there was a running joke, if you will, that I came down here, I think it was summer of 2010, give or take. There was some band thing she wanted me to come down for. Came down, we all went out, had a great time. We got separated walking back, and she got back to her apartment before I did, and I banged on the door, and she was asleep. And and the joke was, apparently I was the only one of her friends that did not know where that key was. I know where it is now.
Well, where
back to
is it
Atlanta.
now?
Where's the key? She keeps the key right there on the, it's a round table, if I recall, you know, patio furniture. It's like a little ceramic thing.
And you don't know anybody that might want to harm her?
No, sir.
Are you worried about that being her?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
David rubs his head, likely a sign of stress, which is understandable given the situation. In addition to being concerned about his girlfriend, he may also be worried that police are suspicious of him. He may know that in most cases where a woman disappears or is killed, the partner is looked at first. Even if someone is innocent and logically knows that the truth is on their side, it doesn't mean they won't be concerned about being wrongfully accused. Eventually, David Van Diver is cleared of any suspicion and allowed to leave the police station. Stephen, on the other hand, has only managed to make himself appear more suspicious. The detective now reveals some of the reasons that they're focusing their attention on him.
You said you didn't have any other cars, right?
Right.
Well, why would everybody you went to school with for the last 3 and 4 years said that you own another car other than that Geo Prism? Everybody I've talked to, all your friends you were in school with, people that you worked at the district attorney's office with said you have other cars other than that car. And you're going to sit here today and tell me you don't have another car?
I don't.
Well, where's it at?
I don't have one.
You never had another car besides that Geo Prism?
No.
So if I call your granddaddy, he's going to tell me that you only have one car?
Yes.
What's his phone number?
I don't know.
Yeah, you do, because I already have his number. You don't know his phone number?
No.
I mean, you seriously can't help us out?
His number is in my cell phone.
Let's start. Where's your cell phone?
At the apartment.
In your apartment?
One of the reasons the detectives are pressing Stephen about having another car is the security footage caught outside the apartment building where he and Lauren lived. It's blurry, so it's unclear exactly who is in the footage, but the detectives clearly suspect that it might be Lauren's killer.
What's up with the pair of underwear that was in your apartment? That was like a mask. It was cut out like a mask. You cut underwear out to look like a mask?
No.
What do you think happened to her?
I think someone took her.
Now, when confronted, Stephen gives the same answer he told the reporter earlier, but his voice has shifted dramatically into a flat tone, devoid of all emotion.
Well, you know there was a body found in the trash can next to the apartments.
Yes.
You do know that. And it's a female, white female's body. Right there. next to y'all's apartment, feet from her apartment. We don't know 100% sure it's Lauren, but we're pretty confident it is. I mean, who would do something to somebody and throw them in a trash can?
I don't know.
I'm asking for your advice or your observation. Who in your complex would do something like that? You lived over there for 3 years. Tonight's the first night I think I've ever been over there.
By asking the suspect to speculate as to the narrative of the crime, the investigator is looking for any facts, especially inconsistent or unpublicized facts, that might create an opening for more direct lines of questioning.
In your expert opinion, of all your knowledge of going through law school and all that, who in that complex do I need to talk to?
I don't know.
This type of question is commonly taught in the Reed technique. The detective likely knows that typically people who commit horrific murders have antisocial personality disorder. Individuals with this personality disorder are typically very grandiose, which means that they love to be admired and praised by others for having what they believe are superior qualities. Being called an expert by the detective would certainly play on a perpetrator's grandiose beliefs about themselves and make it more likely that they will respond. However, it doesn't work with Stephen. Also, an important note to keep in mind is that if Stephen suffered from severe and untreated mental illness, it's unlikely that as a law student he would make it through the years of intensive coursework and field training, which he has. Throughout the interrogation so far, he's barely moved. This stands out against the norm in the interrogation room. People don't sit completely still. They shift, move their hands when they talk, and cross their legs. He may be trying to not give them anything to use against him, but in the process, he's looking more suspicious.
Now, why are you acting like this? I need to know. Why all of a sudden you're acting like this?
I don't understand.
Okay. Earlier today, we sat here and talked. But now you're acting like you don't know what's going on. I mean, did something happen or something to you? I mean, why are you shutting down? Why are you not talking to me?
I don't know.
You don't know? Are you scared?
No.
I mean, you're not scared, are you?
No.
Since Stephen's shift in behavior has been so abrupt, the police decide to speak to one of his friends, David Whitmire, to get a better understanding of who Stephen is. David lived across the street from the apartment complex where Lauren and Stephen lived, and also attended the same classes, so he knows them both.
Did you know this Lauren's next door neighbor, Stephen McDaniel?
Very well.
Notice again how David Whitmire's body is angled toward the detective, just like Lauren's boyfriend, David Van Diver, was, which is noticeably different than how Stephen has been sitting.
You know, Stephen could stay in there a long time and not come back out. And so I would like...
Just stay in his house, his apartment for days?
Yeah. And I would say, you know, and I don't know, like adopting a puppy or something, I'd say, Stephen, and I also didn't always want to eat alone, so I'd say, let's go down to 5 guys.
All this information does is tell investigators that Stephen was likely a loner and possibly a recluse. This is important information for detectives because oftentimes individuals who commit these horrific murders are socially isolated. It also means that he was probably home at the time that Lauren was attacked. According to her friends, because Stephen was a bit of an outsider, Lauren went out of her way to be nice to him, even though she apparently found him a bit strange. Since none of his tactics are working so far, the detective tries something new, attempting to be more aggressive in the hopes this will get Stephen to say something besides, "I don't know." He brings up Lauren's mother and asks what he should tell her about her daughter's disappearance.
And you want me to sit there and tell him that you don't know? Is that what you want me to tell him? Because you're all over the news. You sure stood out there and ran your mouth to the news media. But now you're going to get out here and you don't know. You know. You're just a sorry piece of shit.
By shifting to a more aggressive stance, it's apparent that the Reed method is not working. This also signifies that the investigator has lost control of the interrogation. The detective is likely taking his frustrations about the case out on Stephen, rather than stopping to think about what would be the best approach to get him to talk. He may be trying to rile Stephen up and make him upset enough to admit something in anger. However, name-calling is never a good tactic to get a suspect to open up. This is an example of how sometimes individual law enforcement officers may stray away from standard interrogation protocols, such as the Reed technique. In fact, the Reed technique teaches that the interviewer should remain a neutral and objective fact-finder, which clearly isn't the case here. The desperation on the part of the detective could also backfire, because it may show Stephen that his act is working, and the investigators are getting desperate. For half an hour, the first detective struggles to get any response from Stephen, so another officer enters the room to change up the dynamic.
Why would you not be honest with me?
I am being honest.
Stephen, it just doesn't feel like it, buddy. You know, I get the sense that there's something weighing heavy on your heart right now, and it's breaking you down, and you feel bad about it. I can tell you haven't slept much, have you, in the last few days, have you?
No.
Like something's weighing on your mind, ain't it?
We were looking for Lauren.
You started looking for Lauren yesterday.
Yes.
But you haven't slept in several days, have you?
Yes.
You have?
Yes.
Earlier when I talked to you, you said you hadn't slept in days, that this morning was the first time you was able to get any sleep, was this morning, for a little bit.
No.
Yes, that's what you said. That's what you told me. So I asked you, well, if you haven't been able to sleep in several days, what have you been doing, studying? And you said, yeah, studying. You don't remember that?
No.
By pointing out Stephen's inconsistent statements, the detective is trying to shake his confidence and make him doubt himself. If Stephen feels like he's making a lot of mistakes, that will likely increase his stress, which in turn could cause him to make more mistakes.
What I want you to do, and I'm going to ask you this question, I want you to describe to me how you feel right now. You don't know how to answer that with a yes or no, do you?
I don't know what's going on.
The investigator is once again trying to build rapport through empathy, marking a return to classic interrogation techniques. As well, the switch to open-ended questions suggests that this investigator is perhaps more experienced or more effective than the other.
Lauren's missing. This pretty little girl right here, your neighbor, she's missing.
I know.
You went looking for her last night.
Yes.
Did you hurt Lauren?
No.
Stephen, did you hurt Lauren?
No.
When is the last time you've seen Lauren alive?
I can't recall.
I mean, if that's Lauren's, we haven't positively identified it.
But like his graduation, because you know, once it was all over with, you know, then we didn't like.
And that was in May 2014. So you hadn't seen her like around the apartment complex, coming and going, or anything like that?
No, but I would, from time to time, I would ask. You know, I'd notice her car was either gone or in a different parking place.
This is an example of how deception indicators should not be relied on by themselves and should only be interpreted in the context of the situation. David answers, "I can't recall." This could be considered a selective memory statement, which can be a tell for deception. However, when you look closer at the situation, you see that David had a legitimate reason for not knowing when he last saw her. They were not close friends and didn't really keep in touch after graduation. It's only a red flag for deception if the person being questioned doesn't have a reasonable explanation not to remember.
Actually, I kept up with them a lot because I had to always walk I had to look at everybody's car and everybody's apartment as I walked to class. So I kept up too. But I would ask him, you know, what's Lauren doing? And, you know, generally it were nondescript responses about, well, I think she went out of town, or I think this.
Did Stephen ever tell you, I mean, what his relationship was with Lauren? I mean, he never said that, referred to her as his girlfriend or anything. He just That's his neighbor and a classmate? Or?
Yeah, that was it. I didn't presume anything, and well, see, Lauren had a long-term, steady boyfriend.
You have another vehicle?
No, I don't.
So your grandfather's a liar? Is that what you're saying? You're calling your grandfather a liar. I just talked to him, and he said you own another car.
I don't.
Stephen, we're telling way too many lies in here.
So you're telling me they're lying?
You're willing to tell me that you're a virgin and that you told me you jack off the porn on the internet, but you don't want to admit to having another car? That makes me think you got something to hide, Stephen. That concerns me. You tell me things that most people wouldn't tell somebody else, but yet you lie about something simple.
Why are you trying to hide that you have another car? What's the big deal?
I don't have.
I got 3 cars.
You do. You do.
No, I don't.
It's not at your house.
What happened to it?
I've never had another car.
That's the only car you ever had in Macon?
Yes.
Okay, let me go talk to him again, because that's not what he's saying.
The footage would turn out not to be the linchpin needed to solve this case, as it doesn't actually capture any evidence used to narrow down Lauren's killer. Instead, it's the killer's own oversights which will catch them up in the end.
Stephen, what happened to Lauren?
I don't know.
You like her, don't you?
She's my friend.
Did you ever think about having sex with her?
No.
You never tried to talk to her on a dating level?
No.
Let me go talk. They got his grandfather. Let me go talk, make sure that he owns another car, because he's telling us he doesn't. Be right back.
So you telling me, see that pretty girl right there?
Yes.
You telling me you looked at a pretty girl like that and you never once thought, ever, man, she looks good. You never thought that?
I don't understand.
Do you talk to Stephen? Email to email?
Little brief emails.
Is there anything on there discussing about Lauren?
No. There was only time he ever mentioned Lauren that other than like this, like, have you seen Lauren lately? Well, I would ask him that sometimes. There was this one experience where Lauren's name came up, and he said, boy, you should have been there. He said, Lauren really put on a show. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, she was so drunk. And then he described how she had been out there dancing with some other girl and had fallen, and apparently was not wearing any underwear, or very skimpy underwear like they wear nowadays, and apparently flashed most of the room purely accidentally.
I understand.
And that's the only thing I've ever heard related to Lauren.
The officers appear to have found a potential motive for Stephen to want to hurt Lauren. The speculation that perhaps he had a romantic interest in her wasn't completely misplaced. A friend of Lauren's would later come forward to share that Stephen had asked her out on a date, and Lauren turned him down. This friend also said that he didn't think Stephen had a single bad bone in his body, and was always helpful and kind, even helping one night to make sure when Lauren came home from the bar intoxicated that she got into her apartment okay. However, this friend eventually admitted that Stephen continually asked her out on dates, and even allegedly weirded her out with his attention. Though he doesn't give much away during the interview, posts that Stephen made online reveal he actually thought about dating and relationships a lot. The posts were confirmed to be penned by Stephen because although he uses the nickname SOL, or Son of Liberty, to make the online comments on a few different forums, SOL wrote that they were a law student in Macon. If that wasn't enough evidence, Stephen was also known to send politically charged emails to his entire university, which he signed with his name and the moniker Son of Liberty. In one post, Stephen answered another user's comment with, "Ha, you won't find any pictures like that in my home because I don't have a girlfriend. I just made myself sad." Later, in a post from February 2010, he wrote, "The problem with being a social recluse with a fundamental disability to connect on a romantic level is that we want so much to find that one special person with whom we want to grow old with, raise children with, spend the rest of our lives with, and yet we're incapable of going out and finding her. As it reaches midnight, the detective's frustration begins to show. But even though his answers don't change, the cracks are beginning to show in Stephen's robotic answers.
You knew that there was blood in that apartment.
No.
Yes, you did, Stephen. Yes, you did. There's blood in your apartment, Stephen. That's right. There's blood in your apartment. Stephen, this is hard, buddy. I know this is hard. And I can tell it's on you. You want to let it go. There's blood in your apartment, Stephen. You didn't get it all up. It didn't all come off. You scrubbed and you wiped. But we can tell that. Don't you wipe CSI? Yeah, we know it.
The blood the police claim they found was in Stephen's bathroom. It's hard to know for sure at this point if they actually have discovered this evidence, given how early it is in the investigation. But since police can lie during interrogations, this could be just another tactic to try and get Stephen to confess something.
Is there a chance? But you do admit that there's a chance that I possibly have evidence to show that you do have something to do with that body, correct?
I don't know.
You don't know?
While outright denials can be confronted, I don't know is a much harder statement to confront. There's very little room to redirect this answer into another line of inquiry, as the follow-up questions would all tend to be answerable with yes, no, or I don't know.
Because if I hadn't done anything, I'd say, nope, there's no way. But you say you don't know. Why is that? Why do you say you don't know? Is there a chance that maybe something's there?
No.
Why did you say you don't know?
Because I don't know.
Because you're worried about something? Maybe something that happened, that maybe something got mixed up with something and you're worried about that?
No.
Then why do you say I don't know?
Because I don't know.
How would you not know?
Stephen may be enjoying the fact that he's getting a rise out of the detectives. It may make him feel superior to see how frustrated they're getting while he's able to remain completely deadpan.
I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell it. I wanted to be here with you to go through that process because I know you're not a monster, man. I know you're not a bad guy. You're just a hard-working student trying to pass a bar exam, ain't you?
Show me that scratch again that you showed me earlier. That was it a... What did you say happened there?
I think I scratched myself in my sleep.
Huh.
It's interesting that this question about the scratches on his torso is the one that sparks the most detailed response from him. Perhaps he's trying to deflect the officer's attention from the suspicious marks, because the scratches look like the kind left by fingernails. Though the detective says that Stephen showed him the scratches earlier, Stephen would later claim that he didn't consent to showing the officer anything, and that he'd lifted his shirt without permission.
You know what's crazy? I was talking to people that he works with and everything. They talk about how he's always expresses himself.
But he don't know.
He's very talkative. Stephen, they say you're so talkative, buddy, that you're always so friendly. You stop in and say hello, and you talk. Why is it that you're acting so short with us tonight? If you have all this character and personality about you, why is it that everything that we get from you is yes, no, or I don't know?
I don't know.
If what the detectives are saying about him normally being friendly is true, then Stephen has been very careful not to give away anything verbal or nonverbal throughout this entire process. This must be using a lot of energy and effort on his part. The police may believe Stephen is guilty, but with little evidence at this point and no indication that he's going to crack anytime soon, the detective shows his true frustration.
Why are you lying, Stephen?
I'm not lying.
Yes, you are lying. How long will you continue to do it? She's got a mother and a father and a family out there that is sick over everything. Where's their little girl, Stephen?
I don't know.
Stephen, you know. Where?
I don't know.
Stephen. You're going to look at this right here, this little girl right here, and you're going to say you don't know? I know you know.
I don't know.
Yes, you know. What are you going to say tomorrow when I say we got your hair with the body? What are you going to say to me then? Because you know, like I go like that. Look at my hair. That's how easy it falls out. Look at all that on your head. You don't think nothing fell out? It did. It did, Stephen. We just wanted to give you an opportunity to tell it, so you didn't look like a monster at the end. Because you know what? I don't believe that you're a monster, Stephen. I believe that you're a good guy. You've been picked on. Girls didn't show you the respect that you deserved. You did something stupid. And I believe you feel bad about it. And that's why you're all freaked out right now. But I'm giving you the opportunity to get right. I'm giving you an opportunity to show everybody you're not a monster, that you feel bad about what happened. Your hair's there, man. Your hair is there. We got your hair with the body. How's that, Stephen?
I don't know.
Yes, you do know. Yes, you do know, Stephen.
When the detective claims that Stephen is a good guy who didn't get the respect he deserved from girls, this is part of the theme development phase of the read technique. The detective is trying to shift the blame away from Stephen onto an external reason: girls rejected him, so that it's easier for him to confess. Why? The question on everyone's mind, but the true horror of Lauren's fate wouldn't be revealed for months. Despite the detective's exhaustive efforts, non-stop questions, and over 12 hours of interrogation, Stephen didn't confess. Not then, at least.
You did, buddy. You hurt her, Stephen.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did. Why won't you tell me, Stephen?
I didn't do it.
I'm gonna take this with me. You don't deserve to look at it. Just stay right here, okay?
Okay.
I appreciate all your cooperation tonight, okay?
Okay.
Stephen's lease on his apartment was up in 2 weeks. He was just about to take the bar, become a lawyer, leave Macon and return home, but instead, he's arrested that night and taken to jail. Undoubtedly, his unsettling behavior during questioning helped to solidify the suspicion against him, but soon Stephen would offer an explanation. In fact, just like he explained away his choice to hang around the apartments while they were searched, he would soon offer up a series of claims. None of his allegations have ever been independently verified, nor were they caught on camera, so we can't comment on the validity of his accusations. In a written statement after his arrest, Stephen claimed that after the reporter told him about the discovery of Lauren's torso, he was on the verge of hyperventilating and lost consciousness. Stephen said that he was diagnosed by an emergency medical technician as having suffered a seizure. Instead of being taken to the hospital, Stephen explains he was removed from the EMT's care by the police and brought to the station for his second interview instead. There, Stephen claimed that he told the police he needed medical aid, but instead, when he tried to stand, was pushed back down by an officer, pinning him to the seat. He said that he was disoriented with severe head pain, had lost sensation in his extremities, could barely breathe, and was suffering from impaired vision. He went on to say that he was deprived of medical care and believed his life was in jeopardy from a medical emergency. This, Stephen explains, is why he was in an impaired state during the interrogation, and therefore was barely conscious and not in control of his words or actions. If this is true, it would put anything he said into question. Of course, Stephen would have had a lot of time between the interview and his later arrest to come up with a well-thought-out lie to explain his odd behavior. Still, it's important to note that Stephen's symptoms also sound like a panic attack. It would make sense that he was triggered by the discovery of his friend and neighbor's body, sending him into a panic attack regardless of his guilt or innocence. However, a killer who never expected the body to be found would have reason to be panicked when it was discovered, along with potential evidence. With this accusation in mind, it's impossible to know if his catatonic-like state was the result of a real medical emergency, or if it was an attempt to manipulate the interrogation so he didn't have to give any answers beyond yes, no, and I don't know. As a law student studying criminal law, Stephen would know just what kind of information the officers would be trying to pry out of him, and exactly how to avoid giving anything away. Within this statement, Stephen shows just how deeply he understands the law, writing that when police and prosecutors can only obtain evidence and convictions by violating people's rights and testifying falsely, and when courts ratify such misconduct by the refusal to exclude evidence when the testimony of police, true or false, unmistakably shows that a fundamental right has been violated, the entire system of criminal justice becomes a sham. Finally, he ended the statement with, "My words may go unheeded, but the truth in them will remain, even if no one listens. Who will guard the guards themselves?" However, contradicting Stephen's allegations of being mistreated, an officer wrote in their own statement that though pale and zombie-like, he was offered food and water or anything else he needed, but he said no and mostly just stared into space. In this case, it appears to be his word against the officers. Soon after Stephen's arrest, troubling evidence was uncovered that solidified the police's suspicion. An ex-roommate of Stephen's during his undergrad came forward and told police that when he knew him, Stephen would often ask people how they would commit the perfect murder, starting all the way back in 2007. He would then share his own ideas on how to commit the perfect murder, including wearing shoes that were too small, cutting his hair, and using things such as chloroform to subdue a victim, specifically a female victim, and use chemicals to get rid of the smell of the body. He would then drag the body to a bathroom, since tile and linoleum was easy to clean, and cut up the body in the bathtub. Finally, he would place the body parts in black plastic bags, hide them among his laundry, and sneak them out of the apartment or house so he could distribute them over a large area. Remember these specific details and the fact that Stephen was discussing this 4 years before Lauren was killed, because all of this becomes sickeningly relevant later. Understandably, the roommate was a bit disturbed and would joke that he needed to lock his doors at night, to which Stephen replied that it wouldn't matter since he would pick the lock, rush in, and chloroform him. People who knew him reported that he had a history of breaking and entering, including stealing small items from other people's rooms and apartments. If you recall, Lauren believed that someone had been in her apartment but didn't have any proof. She was likely right, but didn't know that it had probably been Stephen. Another person who knew Stephen during his undergrad told the police about his plan to commit the perfect murder. He said that when he discussed it, he spoke with intense passion and added that Stephen would always say there were 2 ways to become famous: be a movie star or a murderer. Could this be the reason Stephen couldn't help himself and spoke to the reporter knowing that he was the one who committed the crime? Had he been seeking fame, or at least his 15 minutes? The fact that Stephen titled his plan The Perfect Murder is another indication of his grandiosity, along with his talk of fame, as it seems he had the desire to be known by others. People who are narcissistic and grandiose often have a very fragile sense of self and low self-esteem at their core. They compensate for this by adopting a totally opposite manner of interacting in their environment: grandiosity and narcissism. It's possible that Stephen always felt ignored or invisible to others. We know he was isolative and he admitted to not having intimate relationships. It's possible that Stephen craved attention, and this, in combination with some likely built-up anger and frustration, led him to develop a desire for notoriety. In other words, he likely knew that being a movie star was not in the cards for him. We can tell by his poor performance in the interrogation room and when speaking to the news reporter. So Stephen may have decided that being a murderer was the option that could give him the attention he craved for so long. Stephen even expanded on these thoughts, stating to this person that all serial killers had full control over the situation and every person's life they touched. He believed that Stephen wanted total power over someone else. and that it was this want which fueled most of his actions. Often individuals with narcissistic traits feel a need to have control over others. They feel this is a defense against receiving a narcissistic injury or a wound to their ego if they're able to keep others under control. Since it appears Stephen didn't have romantic partners, this need may have been fulfilled with his sneaking around and observing Lauren or others without their knowing. Having full control is a common motivating factor among people with antisocial personality disorder. They derive pleasure from being in full control of people and situations because it feeds into their grandiose sense of self and narcissism. These people often fantasize about being great and powerful and will commit horrific actions to materialize this fantasy. Additionally, since people with antisocial personality are very spiteful and vindictive, they will seek revenge if they perceive that someone has wronged them. Maybe Stephen resented Lauren because she wasn't interested in him romantically. Regardless, it's clear that murder is something that he had given a lot of thought for a long time. Murder could have been an escalation of his breaking and entering behavior. Perhaps his desire to kill was even part of the reason he enrolled in law school. He wanted to learn how he could get away with murder. Once again, Stephen's creepy posts online revealed just how much he'd been thinking about death. Not only was he making comments on message boards just 3 days before Lauren's torso was discovered, right around the time she was killed, but in discussions about survivalist shows, he talked about cannibalism. One post, he said, "If we have to resort to cannibalism, we'll do it in as orderly a fashion as can be done in those circumstances." Another read, "Yeah, cannibalism isn't a first resort, it's the last. It is only undertaken when all other options have run out, and the only choices are starve or cannibalize. As for who, I would take the volunteer if there was one. If not, I'd take a look around, pick out the people who are least likely to survive much longer, and have them draw straws. Short straw dies. Everyone else lives. Supposedly, human flesh tastes most like ham." He expanded on these chilling thoughts, writing, "It seems the last few posts seem to have forgotten that the scenario is eat human or starve. You're bickering about the buildup of fat-soluble toxins and such, when you should only be asking yourself, would I eat another person in order to keep alive because no other source of food existed? If you're too worried about getting a disease, then don't eat and starve to death. If you aren't that worried, then eat the dead body." His other comments about the survivalist show also include a post stating, "Despite how Discovery is portraying it, I'd rather have a global epidemic that wipes out most of humanity than some other disaster scenarios that exist." As well as disaster scenarios where Stephen wrote, "If you fall behind, you get left behind." In a chat room discussing horror movies, he wrote, "Grotesque didn't make me cringe. It was just, driving nails through a man's testicles, cutting off a woman's nipples with a pair of scissors, severing fingers and making a necklace out of them. None of that does anything for me. It was fairly good imagery, but it failed to resonate with me. Yes, I can watch a man disemboweling himself by crawling across a room while his intestines are clamped to a hook and not feel even the slightest disgust. I am that desensitized to gore and torture." It also appears that Stephen often talked hypothetically about how he would try to get away with murder, not only to those who knew him, but online as well. In one post, he spoke about what he might do after committing the act. He claimed that he would sit on the ground and just rock back and forward on the ground, eyes wide and blank. He wrote, "I'd remain in this state for at least a day. No talking, no communication, blank, unfocused stares. I do not fall asleep either. Eventually, when some new stimulus is introduced, a family member I haven't seen, a picture of my brother or something like that, I shake my head from side to side, blink rapidly, and look around in a panicked manner, asking where I am, what's going on, if my family is okay, why I'm there. And when they ask, I'd say I had no memory of anything. They'll probably initiate charges, at which point the family will need to get a lawyer to argue that I had no knowledge of my actions and were not acting of my own volition when I acted. Keep the story consistent, and whenever I'm asked about what happened, I look down and put a sad look on your face, relating what I was told happened, as you have no memory of it. I might end up institutionalized for a while so they can try to figure out what caused the blackout. But if I stuck to the story, it's doubtful I'd end up in prison. He ends his post with, "Of course, this is all hypothetical." Sounds unnervingly familiar, doesn't it? With all of this in mind, it's apparent that he contemplated an insanity or lack of capacity defense at some point before Lauren's death. In law school, students learn about excuse and non-culpability defenses, and his thought pattern generally follows along the same lines as a Manhattan defense. Under the Manhattan rule is generally adopted in various forms by many states. To be found not guilty by reason of insanity, the defendant must be laboring under such a defective reason from disease of the mind as to not know the nature and quality of the act he was doing, or if he did know it, that he did not know what he was doing was wrong. Georgia has slightly modified the rule with the addition of a possible verdict of guilty but mentally ill. Stephen may have attempted to establish this sort of defense when he claimed his odd interrogation behavior was possibly related to a seizure. He did his best to push this narrative passively with his yes, no, I don't know answers and strange behaviors in interrogation. Still, most attorneys would understand that this is not enough to meet the burden of proof for insanity or defect of reason. It appears that when Stephen realized neither of these arguments would work, he then used the statement to focus on trying to prove Fourth and Fifth Amendment violations.
Stephen, I came got you tonight because I need to ask you a few more questions.
The interrogators attempt to question Stephen, but he throws a wrench in their plans.
I have nothing to say without my attorney.
You don't want to hear what we have?
I want my attorney.
Unlike the last time he was in front of the officers, Stephen invokes his right to an attorney, begging the question, why didn't he do this before? It's impossible to know what he may have been thinking, but given his bold news appearance, maybe Stephen was so confident that he would never be caught, he truly believed he could beat the system. He may have actually requested a lawyer here because he was facing a bigger and much more real threat. In the first interviews, he likely felt relatively safe, and therefore more confident in his abilities to defend himself. However, now he has just been arrested, so the stakes are higher. News sources would report that Stephen went to the police station voluntarily, but in a written statement he claimed that he submitted to the demands of the police when it came to him staying at the station, and showing the officer the scratches on his body, claiming that, quote, "In neither instance was my consent a voluntary act. It was a submission to police coercion."
Looks like you've been putting on a little weight in there, man. Dude, I'm just talking casual, not about anything right now. You can feel free to talk. You want anything to drink or anything?
No.
Even when the officer takes a more unique approach, talking about Stephen's beard that has been growing since he was arrested, he doesn't budge.
I wish I could let mine grow out, but they won't let me have one working here, man. Has it reached that point where it started itching yet? See, if you don't feel comfortable with me talking, man, just let me know. I'm just trying to talk casual with you.
I have nothing to say.
Eventually, the police gave up and returned Stephen to his cell. At some point after his arrest, the police got a search warrant and took a sample of his hair, a buccal DNA swab, and fingernail scrapings from Stephen. This evidence would be used to seal his fate, but it wasn't the only evidence found, as much more disturbing things were soon discovered. During a more intensive search of Stephen's apartment, 2 keys were uncovered. Comparing one to Lauren's apartment key, it was found to be an identical match, meaning that Stephen had a key to her place without her knowledge. The second key was determined to be a master key for the entire apartment complex, which the apartment manager later identified as the one she thought she had lost 3 years earlier. But the keys weren't the only damning evidence found in Stephen's apartment, and soon investigators understood why he'd been so hesitant to let them in. They found a flash drive that belonged to Lauren, filled with hundreds of her photos, along with evidence that Stephen had been looking at her Facebook and LinkedIn pages. Beyond that, authorities uncovered a pair of Lauren's underwear in Stephen's apartment. As disturbing as all of this was, it was the discovery of a deleted video that really sealed his fate. Stephen had a wooden pole with a camera duct taped to one end. He used this contraption to record Lauren within her apartment from her window. The deleted video appeared to have been recorded the night she was murdered. In August 2011, after a month in jail, Stephen McDaniel was charged with the murder of Lauren Giddings. This wasn't the only thing Stephen was charged with, however. During their search, police found even more disturbing evidence on a flash drive belonging to Stephen. Sickening and inappropriate images of children. As well, in online posts, Stephen commented encouraging messages under fictional writing featuring inappropriate and disturbing acts with children. He was then charged with several counts of exploitation of children. As the evidence against him grew to the point where his silence and denials were no longer cutting it, Stephen decided to take a plea deal in 2014. The plea, which would allow him to avoid the death penalty and drop the charges of child exploitation, required him to describe exactly what happened to Lauren on the night that she died. In a statement, he admitted that he had a master key to the apartment, but he didn't clarify when or how he stole it from the apartment manager. He used the key to get into Lauren's apartment around 4:30 a.m. on Sunday, June 26th. He was wearing gloves and a mask when he walked into her bedroom and stood over her as she slept. The floor creaked under him, and she woke up and saw him. He said that Lauren sat up and calmly told him to get the f*** out. Stephen leaped across the bed and grabbed her by the throat. She struggled to get away from him, even tumbling onto the ground together, but Stephen managed to keep his hands around her. Still, as she tried to get away, Lauren reached up and pulled off Stephen's mask. As he strangled her, she managed to say, "Stephen, please stop." But he continued to hold on to her for several minutes, maybe as long as 15 minutes, until Lauren finally stopped moving. He then dragged her body into the bathtub and left, going back to his own apartment. As though he hadn't just committed an unthinkably horrific act, Stephen spent the next day in his apartment on the computer before going back to Lauren's with a hacksaw around midnight. He began to dismember her, wrapping the body parts in black trash bags before discarding them in the Mercer Law School dumpsters while it was still dark. Besides her torso, the rest of Lauren's remains have never been recovered. It's possible that when Lauren awoke and spotted Stephen in her room, he impulsively decided in that moment to kill her. That could explain why he then left and didn't come back until later to dismember the body, as he wasn't prepared to do so right after he killed her. Lauren waking and catching him may have unhinged this sense of control. As well, this sense of control may have already been unhinged by the fact that she was planning to move away so soon, which would bring an end to the relationship he may have felt they had. It doesn't seem like a coincidence that Lauren was killed just days before she was due to move. Along with this, there was one other thing that may have influenced the timing of the attack on Lauren. She had just sent her dog to live with her parents after graduation so that she could focus on studying for the bar. Stephen may not have wanted to break into her apartment if her dog was there, as barking would be a dead giveaway. He may have felt more comfortable after the dog was gone. To complete his efforts to hide the evidence, Stephen cut up the mask, gloves, and shirt he was wearing and flushed them down the toilet in his apartment. Many of these details are hauntingly familiar, except for the chloroform. It appears that Stephen executed his plan to carry out the perfect murder. Well, not so perfect actually, in the end. The cover of the hacksaw he used was found in his apartment, and the hacksaw itself was reportedly found in the maintenance room of the apartment building. Ironically, the officers were able to enter the maintenance room using the master key they found in Stephen's apartment. The hacksaw still had both dried blood and tissue on it. It eventually matched Lauren's DNA. Stephen also made sure to note in his statement that he never assaulted Lauren and that he still managed to attend his bar prep classes on the Tuesday and Wednesday after killing her. However, fellow law student David Whitmire contradicts this. There was a scheduled study group at the law college on Monday, June 27th, the day after Lauren was murdered, and Stephen missed it.
Was he even at class last week?
That's a good point. I tried to tell somebody and they wouldn't listen to me, but he missed Monday.
Okay, and you know that for a fact because you were there.
Oh, absolutely. I know.
So he wasn't there Monday.
No, and he showed back up Tuesday, and so he walked in and I asked him, I said, well, you know, where have you been? And because he doesn't miss. And so and he said, well, he didn't feel good. He'd been sick. And I said, well, what were your symptoms? And he said, well, I didn't feel good. I had a scratchy throat. I said, "You have a fever?" And I thought this was odd, but it's just Stephen. He said, "I don't have a thermometer." And I thought, there's not a 25-year-old single male in the United States that owns a thermometer.
Yeah.
What may be the most baffling of all was that Stephen struggled to clarify why he murdered Lauren at all, and yet still displayed chilling self-awareness. He wrote, "It's difficult for me to explain why I killed Lauren. The difficulty in explaining it lies in my own inability to understand it myself. I know that it was very wrong. I'm not delusional or without morals or decency. Yet I acknowledge that something in my makeup, my psychology, my neuropathy, my own particular pathology perhaps, must explain it. But it's beyond my reach. Lauren was my friend." In his statement about his psychology, neuropathy, and pathology, Stephen basically admits that he meets the exact definition of an individual who poses a hazard to society. Both investigators and Lauren's family have shared their doubts about Stephen's statement, saying that he had a lot of time to prepare the letter, and there were many things omitted that he might never share. Lauren's sister Caitlin has stated that she doesn't believe anything he has said. Stephen McDaniel was sentenced to life in prison. During a retrial in 2018, he represented himself and again made the claim that he had not consented to the search and that he was coerced by the police before, during, and after his interrogation. The appeal was denied, but the story doesn't end here. As recently as May 2022, Stephen filed a habeas corpus petition, alleging that his imprisonment is unlawful because he had ineffective counsel when he first pled guilty. There is yet to be a result released in this filing.